Welcome to Gold Coast Insider, where we bring you business insights, stories, opportunities and forecasts from movers and shakers across the Gold Coast. I'm your host, Estella Rodiguero. I'm CEO of Regional Development Australia Gold Coast. Joining me today is Larissa Rose. Larissa is a locally and nationally highly recognised environmental consultant who has contributed at a United Nations level. Her leadership in sustainability and environmental management has seen her advancing policies for the use of renewable fuels in Queensland while enabling projects opportunities to decarbonise the transport sector. Larissa is Board Director of the World Bioenergy Association. She sits on the Gold Coast City Heart Taskforce, is an Adjunct Lecturer at Bond University, and the Director of GG Enviro, her environmental consultancy company, which she's had for 13 years right here on the Gold Coast. Good morning, Larissa. Thank you for speaking to me today.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. It's great to have a chat today.
Now, I thought we'd start by getting to know a bit of your background, a bit of your career history, because I was really interested to find that in your 20s, you were actually forging a career as a chef.
Yes, I was. I was located living on the beautiful southern end of the Gold Coast and was looking at carving out my career as a chef and loving every moment of it and the opportunities that gave me to also travel around Australia and work remote places. But yeah, eventually I decided that was enough of that little world for me.
Okay, so the question is, how do you move from being a chef as a career to what you're doing, an environmental consultant? So where do we start on that journey?
Yeah, it's such an interesting shift for me, I guess, because I sort of got through my younger time of not really knowing what you wanted to do, but just aligning to a job in a career. And obviously that's a trade, being a chef, but then progressing across to probably being a little bit more comfortable within myself and where I was at and making choices around, well, what do I want to do for my job? I don't want to be a 45-year-old chef who's only earning so much and working horrific hours. So I guess that was probably a driver for me to go, oh, I don't know if I want to do that now. I might change careers. And through that period, I guess, environment sustainability was sort of a quiet sort of corporate word, I guess, in terms of you either worked with the mining companies and worked in environment as an environmental, scientist and consultant, or you worked with big corporations to build out their environmental social governance sort of work. And it wasn't really a big thing that everybody in the market knew what they were talking about. So in that time, I think the industry started to change and Australia was really starting to take on the grasp of like, what's renewables? What does it mean for Australia and how we start changing our whole energy transition? And that early days was really around solar, but there was some new sort of technologies coming in. And I happened to read this article that was on the back page of the Gold Coast Bulletin. And it was talking about a gentleman who had come over from China, was trialing wave movement technology. So this is a type of what we call a bioenergy, where you've got these sort of paddles that are underneath the water in tidal movement. So they're trialing it at the Spit on the Gold Coast. And that obviously runs turbines and moves a turbine engine and then creates like a green energy, a green electricity. So they were trialing that. And I read that and just went, oh my goodness, this is like the future. I can see where this is going. So I literally ripped it out, stuck it inside this envelope and wrote my new job and career, and then continued to sort of just keep doing my work in where I was working industry at the time, and just started to research it, look up what this whole industry was, what was going on overseas, what that looked like for Australia. And then I was going, I'm just going to get into this industry. I'm going to start uni. So I put myself into Bond Uni, started to do my environment degrees. And I actually, about 6 months later, ended up working for that guy, Greg. I forgot his surname now, but Greg Paxton. And I ended up working for him and working in his bioenergy company. And I did that for some time before I really kickstarted into my uni degrees. So yeah, it was a bit of a slow transition without being super intentional, but maybe a little bit that I knew I needed to change my career.
Yeah. So you're sitting at Bond University in 2010, you're doing a Masters of Sustainable Development. What was that light bulb moment that led you further into your career and starting your company and founding your company, GG Enviro?
Yeah, I'd been working for that company doing the bioenergy work. And now that I was in my master's, we had a big shift and change, the lay of the land, I guess, in terms of Australia. From a political perspective, there was a lot of dialogue around what it would look like to have a carbon tax, an emissions trading scheme. So there was this real nudge and movement in the industry. And I ended up doubling down and doing a carbon sort of assessment postgrad as well. But I just sort of looked at the market. I was an independent mum at that stage too, with 2 children. So I knew when I finished my degree that if I really wanted to jump into the industry and become working in environment, I needed to go work with the companies that had the big portfolios that would hire and contract environmental scientists and environmental sustainability sort of experts. So that really meant I needed to go to Brisbane and work in the city with a lot of the big fours in terms of mining. They had big portfolios allocated for environment. And then or what you needed to do was you needed to start your own business. So it was sort of one or the other. Yeah. And I just knew that me living on the southern end of the Gold Coast and raising children just wasn't a part of the matrix that was going to work for me. So I was like, well, oh my God, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to start my own business. And I literally was sitting in my economics class and thought, I'm just going to start my own business. I registered my business name. It was called Glowing Green Australia. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to carve out an opportunity. I had some great connections, obviously, exposure at Bond Uni. And I thought, well, I can just maybe get some small little contracts and work. And the day after I registered it, I sort of told one of my professors at uni, and he said, oh, I know an ex-environmental scientist who used to work or do a uni degree here. He needs help with some contract work he's got. Do you want to do some reporting? I'll hook you guys up. And I ended up getting my first contract straight away. So I was writing flora and fauna assessment reports, which were quite similar to what you're learning at uni. And yeah, it just went from there. But I did it because I needed to do something that served me well, because I wanted to be a present mother. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I wanted to start building this career. So I took the risk, I took the edge. I felt like I jumped with the no parachute on because it was risky, but it just sort of fell for me a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you said your company was originally called, I can't recall.
Glowing Green Australia.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And now it's referred to your company as GG Enviro. What does GG Enviro stand for?
Yeah. So I guess over the years we rebranded maybe a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And we just, because Glowing Green Australia is such a long name, and it eventually started to, people were assuming that we're like a non-for-profit or like an organisation, because it does sound quite like an organisation. Yeah. And we had the globe with the leaf, that old school logo that was at the time quite relative to the industry. So everyone in industry would just nickname us GG. So it just became like that. So eventually we rebranded and we called ourselves GG Enviro, which seemed a little bit more specific and gave us a bit more of a corporate look and stuff now.
So you got your first contract, right? You were really lucky through Bond University. Yep. And then, so that's great. But what happened after that? Like, where did you go to from there? Because what you were doing was really quite scary in retrospect. You're starting your own company, you branched out, you've stopped your original career of being a chef, you've gone into the great unknown, but you've done it out of passion and you've done it out of a vision that you had. So how did that translate? How did you get to where you are now from your very first contract? And I think we're talking to a lot of people who probably have some great ideas about what they want to do with their life choices. What is that journey and what does that look like? And how did you get there?
Yeah, that's important. I think it is so great for the audience to hear it, because I know at times a lot of our interns, they just want to hear the realism around, well, how did you do it? Did you have it all carved out in your brain? I was like, no, I didn't. I winged it a lot of the way, So through my studies, I ended up doubling down and really finding a niche that I was really interested in, which was around renewable fuels. So instead of renewable electricity, energy, it was like liquid fuels. So all the fuels that we need to put into our engines. So biofuels, a lot of people in the audience will know what ethanol is, or they'll see E10 at the service station. So I got really interested, and I did a bit of a research paper around that in my final parts of my degree. And after I did that, I was really quite frustrated seeing that Australia hadn't had a great opportunity to look at, doing renewable fuels, and we hadn't, comparative to all these other countries I'd done research work on. So I was like, I'm really like into this, and I feel really advocating and want this to happen. So I wrote this research paper, and then I just had this like moment. I can literally still remember being in like one of the labs at uni and thinking, I should send this to like a politician or someone who's really advocating renewable fuels in Australia. And at the time, I decided to flick it to the only one that I knew, which was a federal politician called Bob Katter. And he was keen on biofuels because it helped with the sugarcane industry up north and moving ethanol. And ethanol helps us replace the amount of petrol fuel that we put in our cars. So I just sent it to him. And this is a moment, I think, for the audience to go, I didn't intentionally have it carved out. I just sort of winged it with a moment of knowing how I felt about it. I was passionate about it. I knew it was needed. And it wasn't done to go, oh, I want to try and blow up my career. I just went, well, you never know if you don't go. So jump without the parachute. I sent it to the chief of staff. She wrote back to me a few weeks later and was like, Bob's on the Gold Coast. He wants to meet you and talk about your research paper. You seem to be the only one sort of really talking a lot about it on the ground. So, yeah, literally it just flipped around in about 6 weeks' time, and ended up working in Canberra and did a couple of sittings pushing and advocating for that and what that looked like, and shaping up the narrative and pushing that for us federally, but also aligned on a state level with the Katter Party to push and advocate that through the Newman government period. And then this is another part of it. It's just you never know if you don't go. I think the premise of all of this is. And then out of that, we pushed and advocated for that to happen at Queensland. And then we had the Palaszczuk government come in. And yeah, the next minute we had a biofuels mandate in Queensland. Wow. And ethanol fuel was mandated at the Bowser. So now when you're at the service station, you see E10. That's because it's enforced to make it a fuel that's available for yourself as a customer and a consumer, because once before it wasn't. And as you can imagine, the big fuel companies don't want an inferior fuel coming in and diluting out their lucrative market that they have.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. So let's look at the Gold Coast now. Let's look at what you are doing, and you're doing extremely well. So it's 2023. So what do you see as some of the major challenges facing companies, businesses and developers in terms of sustainability and renewable energy moving forward?
There's a couple of aspects. The first one, and then I'll break them down. The first one is the journey to actually embedding and building out sustainable, practice management inside your company and business model, and the application of that intangibly being able to point to how you've embedded environmental and sustainability practices. And that, I guess, is dovetailed into decarbonising as a business and a company. The second sort of barrier I think like a lot of businesses and companies have, which sort of keeps them 1 foot in and 1 foot out at times, has been this whole greenwashing and not feeling a sense of wanting to get that integrity, but feeling a sense of is it all just smoke and mirrors and puffy air, and just getting a lot of clarity for businesses to get out of that, because we have had a bit of a greenwashing timeline going on over the last probably 10 years. So now I guess there's a sense of those two pillars that everyone's looking at. So to extend further on the first one, I guess if barriers or obstacles or a sense of wanting to get confidence in knowing that they can actually deliver on sustainability and build that out in their business model and it's not too overwhelming, I guess that's a really great role and opportunity that I've seen that we've been able to support companies to do, and to carve that out and navigate them for them. And I guess that's a customization of around how, depending on your industry and sector you work in, how you're going to embed sustainability and build out that environmental, social governance portfolio and role, and how you build it out in a way that's actually giving your key stakeholders, but also your customers and consumers and the market signals to state, we're doing a job and we're doing it properly. and we're not just flicking out glossy documents that state stuff. So, really, I guess we sort of hold the hands in helping those businesses really shape that up and help them identify with what that is and what that means to them and their business, and give them that sense of ownership that they can stand steadfast in that narrative, and position themselves in the market around how they're driving that.
And what are the benefits of doing it? I mean, I think for a lot of years it was seen as it was mandatory in a lot of tendering. You had to prove that you had the sustainability model, but really, why should businesses now look at that as part of their sell or part of their business? What is that advantage for them, or what's their responsibility towards that?
Yeah, well, we've seen, 10 years ago, the only reason why you needed an environmental consultant or you worked with an environment company was because you were driven by a policy regulation. Absolutely. So it was that policy approach that was just squeezing down and enforcing you as a business to regulate to the requirements of government or a local legislation. So we've seen a huge shift and change now. So over the last 10 years, it's gone from heavily policy driven to that's still there, but market driven. So we've got this push now where business to businesses are now driving the change, and it's got nothing to do with policy or government because of this shift that's happened from overseas has started to flow and affect into Australia. So what that's really meant, I guess, in relative is that, yes, the tendering part has been, once before it was like, oh, what's your environmental management plan? It was a high-level plan and you just slotted it in as attachment B. Yep. Whereas now there's a full due diligence and a whole framework that you're needing to fulfill and commit, because other businesses have sustainability scorecards and procurement policies and metrics. Yep. To gauge that they can't work with another business unless this business that they're wanting to work with has got their backyard tidy, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of the drivers that are going on. That B2B is happening a lot, but also consumers and people who are purchasing products and services are knowing that they want to only work with and align with other businesses who are in alignment, because they want to make sure that they've got their backyard tidy and they don't get caught to be seen to working with another company or purchasing products of a company that are actually quite detrimentally bad and can affect their potential point of sales or engagement because they didn't do their due diligence in their backyard work and have got a product or a service or something that's, quite carbon intensive or aligned to a company that is doing wrong or not doing good. So a lot of that's going on now, which is fantastic because it's a much more organic way of the market shifting and changing and businesses needing to present themselves in a forward-facing position.
Because I think as consumers, we've really changed. And I don't know, you probably be better at knowing this than me, but I know from my own aspect, I now look at, the packaging, I look at, buying in bulk so that I can put it into glass, I can refill. Has that journey for consumers, has that been notable in its change in our awareness of from who we buy from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a big shift in terms of people being more conscious now. Yeah. I think that's a huge thing. There's a consciousness around being able to identify with stuff that we didn't, like your example there with like packaging or something gets delivered. Now to be like, well, why isn't that delivery bag that I got my clothes delivered in or something that I purchased online, how come it's not got some sort of recyclable or compostable component to it? And, there's so many different examples on that now. So I think the consumers have identified with that. And then that's another key driver because people want to see, I guess it's that it aligns with that ethical alignment, that ethical position. And if you're started to shape up your own ethical positioning around how you see your impact with environmental stuff, your choices around what you purchase and consume, then that starts to help. That will shift and change. So if you're selling something, you need to be conscious that you've got, a market out there and consumers out there that are starting to think like that.
Absolutely. And then, okay, so why don't we break it down even further? And then what can we do in our offices and in homes to make, to be part of that solution, to feel good about ourselves, about what we're doing to support the environment? What's the small things we can do?
Yeah, there's some really great easy ones that we sort of run companies through to sort of go, okay, well, what's our first step? What's our low hanging fruit that we can work from? Which is not too, because it can get overwhelming. It can, this whole sustainability thing. It's like,
yeah.
where do I start? Like, what are we going to do? And depending on the industry and sector. But some first things are like anything, let's just stop. Let's do some recalibration and do an audit and an overview.
Yep.
Where are we at? What are we doing? Where can we make changes? Why do we purchase off that? Do a check of the suppliers, the products. Sometimes with some companies doing a waste audit where you just segregate the waste right at the end, and it helps you identify with all the different waste streams to go, what is this? Why are we using this? Why is something wrapped in that way? Or what product are we buying to keep having this product in our landfill bin? Is there a choice that we can make in that purchasing point to remove that waste stream? So they're really easy wins. And I mean, it's depending on the type of business and what you have, but doing a bit of an overhaul in your office, that whole supply chain aspect is a really good one. Assessing that, assessing your waste streams, looking at ways that you might want to segregate the bins a bit better and create a little bit of a mini waste management plan inside your business to kind of go, all right, well, our first step, let's make it easy. Let's segregate the waste streams a bit better. Let's overhaul what's going into those bins. Let's look at our energy, waste and water. They're really good 3 top ones. Can we convert to a much more renewable green, contractual agreement? That's a great way to decarbonise your business straight away. There's lots of opportunities to do that now with different suppliers of electricity. Water metering, changing of the products on how water, enters sinks and tanks and toilets and things like that. So that's sort of a good first step. And then also building up a bit of a ethos and opinion piece of how you want to speak to sustainability and thinking about how you want to position your business and how you would like to see it. A little bit of a backdoor approach, step back outside and have a look back at your business and look at where it's going and the market and who you want to future-proof yourself to over the next 5 years in terms of clients and industry and sector and exposure. And what are you needing to do to position your business to be future-proof to that? So, yeah, that's the first easy kind of way to look at it.
Yeah, it's an easy step, and it's you feel like you're becoming part of that solution. So the Gold Coast. We live here on the Gold Coast because it's the best place in the world. It's got beautiful beaches, pristine beaches. It's got the most gorgeous, greenfield sites out the back here, and we all love climbing over everything here. But it's growing rapidly, which of course is bringing lots of challenges, and particularly around the housing and that green space. What's your vision on how the Gold Coast should be growing? And let's look at the green space. What's a solution for fighting to maintain that green space that we need so dearly in this city?
Yeah, it's one of those situations for any exponentially growing city like we have here on the Gold Coast is being able to ensure that we've carved out those ecological or those green spaces and corridors, but also create more specifically greener spaces when we're building out in our planning around estates and developments and things like that, and keeping the city internally as green as it can and remove as much concrete jungle as we can. And a lot of the stuff too, we're dealing with legacy of town planning, some time ago. So we're trying to mitigate or adapt and deal with city planning that was carved out intentionally, but I guess we've got quite a linear city, and we've had 2 sort of main ways up and down the Gold Coast how you get around, and a lot of that was carved out from 100 years ago. So now we need to kind of work in and around what we've got to ensure that we are embedding as much green space as possible, but being conscious that we're not doing urban sprawl and carving out and destroying all of that and beautiful environment corridor that we have to the west of the city, off the west of the highway, to ensure that we're not spreading all the way out. The next minute we've got estates all the way through to Bow Desert, So I guess that's a big part, that any push and pull that we have with the city. And in terms of my environmental perspective of it, and, as an environmental consultant, people probably assume a lot that I'm anti-development, but I'm actually pro-development and pro, I guess, in terms of the fact that for any city, you need to, the key word I say again is, how do we future-proof out the Gold Coast? And to future-proof it out, we need to work with the growth of it. And the growth of it is the market is driving growth in this city, and people are coming here and it's expanding. And economically, we need that. We want a real good functioning economic city. And what comes with that, everyone wants this abundant, financially, fruitful city that you can come here and build a business, and there's opportunities and there's lots of money floating around. But if you want that, we have to have a city that grows and expands. And that means more people and more industries and more, more industrial areas and more sites. So manufacturing can come, and then you can sell your products to that. And then your kids can stay here on the Gold Coast and work and not have to move to other big cities to get those opportunities. So there's this fight and conundrum at times, and I like to try and shut it down. It's like you can't have one thing and say you want this growing, fruitful city and your kids can work here. Meanwhile, you're freaking out because we've got more high-rises going up and there's another estate. But there's a pull and play that has to happen with that. So I guess at the end of the day, my view is it's either up or it's out. And that term is in relation to building these buildings in the city. And we need to go up. We need the high rises. We need these big multi-leveled residential apartments to help actually future-proof our city out, to bring in the people that need to be here and to live. Because let's be real about it, we can't keep having our amazing dynamic suburbia, blocks all across this city, because we're going to cap out. And a city will actually cap out because we haven't gone up to allow for that other layer to build a really dynamic and engaging city. So the level of going up is bringing in the people who can come and live here to create a really great, healthy, economic sort of cogs moving for this city, which is around all the different industries, all the different expertise, and I know that we need to talk a lot about building sustainable housing that can afford people not to have the luxurious high level $1.8 million apartments, because we can't all afford those. But the city's obviously identified with that, and we've got a lot of build to rent. That's opportunities here on the Gold Coast now. So it's a part of it. Everyone just has to get used to it. We're going up. We're not going to have the cute little asbestos shacks running all the way down the Gold Coast anymore. And I say hooray to the developers, because they're the ones who are cleaning up the asbestos, because we don't want asbestos in our city.
True.
And, they're spending the money to clean it up and help build and redevelop parts of our Gold Coast that are slumpy and run down. And to do that, the developers are going to do that. The town planners are shaping it up. So we have cities that have multiple different businesses and industries. We have these multi-layered areas where we've got businesses, we've got commercial, we've got residential, we've got hospitality, we've got all of those businesses, which help at the end of the day. If you've built that multi-variation of types of residents and businesses in one spot, it keeps people in the city. It keeps people in that little location and zone. Like we're noticing a lot in Palm Beach and all those hubs. You don't need to go to Broad Beach now to go to dynamic restaurants. You can do all of that on the southern end of the Gold Coast now. Palm Beach, Kirra, all the way down there. So that in turn is helping decarbonise, because we're keeping people located more. If there's more commercial offices and buildings, people will work down there. They're not going to go to Bundall and Southport anymore to have an office. And
then that brings in transport, which, of course, anyone that's been on our roads knows that is continuing to be a massive issue on the Gold Coast. So that would impact on transportation. No longer will you have to drive to these various other locations, but also we need to talk about transport here on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, for sure. So we obviously have a linear city, as mentioned, and we need to move around in a very up and down sort of way. And that creates a very different framework, I guess, in terms of transportation and how the mapping is on how we would, again, create a really dynamic city that has capacity for you to get out and around and enable yourself to move around our city. So we need light rail, and that's straight up the way that we get movability and accessibility around our city. Now, because we've got such huge growth and development and movement in our southern ends, we've got it on our northern ends as well now, with a bit of industrial and commercial and all of that, and manufacturing that's going up on the northern end. We need to create that movability, and that's a big part. And a lot of people are very frustrated with light rail. Yes, we've done the best that we can give. And remember, that Gold Coast Highway was carved out and town planned out a long, long time ago, before, you know, a lot of the planners back then and the council back then were realising that the Gold Coast would be the city that it is now, and that's the key to future-proofing. Having a light rail is successfully setting ourselves up to be able to move around this city over the next 50 to 60 years. And that's for the future generations as well. Imagine being left with the conundrum that they're going to have if everyone was anti the light rail and we never got it done. And then in 30 and 40 years' time, how are we going to create really great manoeuvrability around the city? So this is around our children and the next generations moving forward, and all of the businesses that are going to be able to successfully be set up and the companies that are going to anchor and want to work here, when there's something like a simple centralised capacity to be able to get from the southern end all the way to the northern end of the Gold Coast. And light rail's the key.
So looking at the challenges moving forward for the Gold Coast, and some of the things that we're looking at is that it's imperative that we plug the new emerging markets in our current businesses and projects. And some of the things that, and which is at this stage, we need to look at that progressive global shift that's currently going on. Now, some of the things you've highlighted are the green manufacturing and green technologies. Did you want to speak to that? And then the bioenergy hubs, which I think is incredible. So can you just talk to those emerging industries that we potentially could have here?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I guess, you know, the Gold Coast is definitely not just necessarily known for, you know, some of those core industries that it was known for. Now we've got really huge opportunity of a huge scope of industries and sectors that can actually anchor and plug in here on the Gold Coast. We would not have thought for the life of us, even 5-10 years ago, that we would have all the way from, you know, what we've got with space going on now up on the northern end of the Gold Coast to thinking once, you know, 20 years ago, it was just about entertainment and it was about hospitality, and they were really the core fundamentals around why you anchored. And so now there's different technologies that we can seek and work with, and producers of those technologies that are basing themselves here on the Gold Coast. So in green manufacturing, I guess there's a lot of space where we've had the change in the market, which has enabled new technologies to be able to offer and provide, you know, green products. So I think green manufacturing is really around these manufacturing hubs now that are going to be able to offer opportunities for businesses to locate there and produce products that are low carbon or decarbonised. And I guess that's because in that manufacturing hubs, those hubs now have solar, they have, you know, really low water emissions output. You know, they're working on different waste segregations and minimalisation of waste. So green manufacturing also is around those technologies that now can produce and cut. And I guess cut would be meaning as in cut steel, concrete, provide cut plastic in a way that's done to have reduction of waste stream and not offcuts and all that type of thing. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. There's demand for estates and businesses that want to make sure that the production of the products that they have in their company are actually as green as possible. So you would want to, as a business, if you were looking to allocate on the Gold Coast, if you had a standard manufacturing set of units, an industrial estate that you wanted to go to, but you had a green hub, you know that there's an opportunity to do a green hub. You would go there because your market is squeezing and pushing you to demand products that are decarbonised and they have less carbon attached to them. So yeah, renewable hubs are definitely the way, and the northern end of the Gold Coast has a lot of space for that. Bioenergy is an interesting topic. The northern end of the Gold Coast is a good precinct where we can see a lot in the sugarcane farming region, where we can produce a waste to energy model. So we've got a lot of different food to waste organics now that can be made and turned into energy.
Yep.
So that's one technology pathway. So it's called waste to energy, but also those waste streams can be converted to produce green electricity, but also can be put back in the loop, the circular economy loop, where it could go into composting and things like that. So FOGO, which is the food organics and green organics, they have an availability now because there's so much market demand. There's a change in the waste structure now where we segregate that waste, and it's driven the opportunity for that market to move. So that's a really great, hub situation that we can see sitting on the northern end of the Gold Coast. And then there's all different technologies now that can take different types of waste streams and convert them into bioplastics and biocrudes. And those biocrudes are like an alternative crude oil compared to petroleum oil. And therefore we can make other types of bioplastic products. So great spaces for us to be able to really tap into that type of market here on the northern end of the Gold Coast. Right. And that's something definitely you would not have heard anyone talking about, oh, you should move to the Gold Coast, and start your bioenergy technology company. That's something we'd not have heard about 10 years ago.
Yeah. So the Gold Coast, where the Olympics will be ran in just under about 9 years' time. What can the Gold Coast do to take advantage of this global event that's being held right here, in our region?
Wow, yeah, that's a bundle and a half, because I guess there's this antsiness of feeling like, I think in varying circles, I guess, around, have we got ourselves together? Like, are we going to be able to enact and deliver on that? And have we got some really great embedded legacy frameworks that are going to be able to set the Gold Coast up to be even more a dynamic city again post 2032. So I guess that question's been going around, but then it's like, well, what does that look like and mean? Like, what are we not doing right now? What do we think's not happening? I think there's a fairness to say we've kind of got to see out the rest of this year and see what gets announced and what gets anchored, and what sort of frameworks or policies or initiatives are going to be getting delivered on from local government level, council, local government, all the way through to state and federally, what happens here. But I think there's a bit of that pull and play on it. And I think the things that I really see that we need to make sure we move fast enough with and make sure we're changing the way how we have infrastructure here on the Gold Coast is considering for setting ourselves up for success for the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games is around what we're producing, what we're transmitting, what we're transporting, what we're consuming, how we're managing our city, how we use energy, how we, navigate our waste, our water, the different goods and services, and what are we doing to ensure that we're building, constructing, and developing the city to manage and navigate the growth of those things that have to shift and change. And I guess that's around with policy, how we regulate stuff. A consideration too is around, which just aligns with what we just talked about for transport and things like that. We need to move people up and down our city, and we need to understand we still have to have trucks that have to take waste out of our city. So if we've got high density areas, building and stuff like that, we need to make sure that we're reducing the amount of cars that are going up and down the city, because we still have things like waste that we have to move. We've still got transporting goods and services. So we need still a lot of heavy trucks, heavy fleet to move and fulfill all the requirements up and down our city, because we don't have like a solid rail line that runs it. We need the heavy trucks and vehicles to run up and down our city. So we need to put passengers onto the light rail so we can allow for that growth of those heavy trucks and vehicles that still have to take bread, milk, food, cart stuff. Waste has to be removed, all that sort of products that need to be delivered up and down the Gold Coast. So we need to sort of support and think about that. And that's going to happen a lot as well as we grow all these other different parts of infrastructure on the Gold Coast. How we get that transportation right is important as well. So I guess a roundabout way to answer that is, we just need to make sure that we're transitioning, efficiently and equitably, and we're doing it importantly, we're doing it right, and we've thought strategically ahead about it. And that's, I guess, just aligns back to how do we keep ensuring that we're future-proofing our city for now, but over those legacy pieces over the next 10, 20 and 30-year timeline chunks.
Absolutely. So ESG, or environmental social governance, is becoming more prevalent. In fact, we're now seeing that we're embedding it into every project we're doing. So if I put up a project, or I'm writing a project, certainly from the state government and federal government perspective, that has to be something that's underpinned somewhere in that. Can you just clarify for us a little bit and talk to us a little bit more about what it actually is?
Yeah, well, originally ESG, I guess, is environmental social governance. So governance is that framework that you've embedded to govern and ensure that it's a risk kind of aspect of looking at your business. And I guess a lot of it was more so the top 100 sort of companies on the ASX were sort of enforced, I guess, in terms to ensure that they could represent all of their stakeholders and shareholders and their board to have a governance framework to support environmental and social aspects. And that was an enforcement, I guess, when you're a listed company like that. Now that's just anyone, business as usual, are doing it. So it's not just the big multinational industry or companies that are publicly listed. Now it's just everyday business to business, and now understanding that they need to embed that. We can make it really, really simple. It's around your as your business, what is your, internal policies around how you're managing your environment, your social impact, and that economic impact. And I guess that's the three pillars of ESG: environment, social, and economic. And I guess economic's always been an easy one because it's always been led to a profit kind of item line. And environment and social impact have always been way down the end. The market's not demanded that you have that in order. But now it is. So I guess you need the environment, social aspect of quite high and sit sometimes above the economic part now. Most shareholders won't be happy with that, but it does, and it sits there now. So, and the market's demanding of that. So if you don't pay attention to it, you're putting your company and business at significant risk. And a lot of that risk now is sitting with the CFOs because they can understand the importance of climate risk now. So I guess you need to look at what it is for your business to take a bit of a policy or a little bit of an internal framework to go, how are we navigating environment, how are we navigating the social impact aspect, community engagement, building green partnerships, and aligning our businesses to work with other companies. And then from an economic model perspective, I guess, we have to understand if you're choosing to venture into more environment. 10 years ago, it was a lot more cost expensive. Now it's becoming, a bit more common price metric. But I guess that's sort of an easy way to look at ESG is to go, how do we speak to environment? How do we speak to social? And then what does that mean to our customers, clients, consumers, supply chain, and all our key stakeholders? And then you're also taking consideration, what are your key holders and consumers saying to you that you need to do to step up? Otherwise, you're just going to miss out and lose business with them.
Which I guess is where companies like GG Enviro come in. Like if you're trying to negotiate or to find your way around all that, that's pretty well what you do, isn't it? Essentially.
Yeah. We just come in and give you a set of eyes, and probably, if you're in a business position, a lot of businesses and companies that come to us can be a little bit like, oh my God, it's so bad. We should have had this stuff sorted ages ago. And everyone has that. So don't fear if the reason why you're not approaching it is because you're in the conundrum of like, oh my God, we should really have it. We don't want anyone to know that we haven't got our backyard tidy. So, and that's fine. A lot of people haven't got their backyard tidy, but you can just get in and get it done and get the journey started. So we come in and help give you a set of eyes, I guess, in terms of building out a strategy, building out your 5-year roadmap. What does this look like? What does this mean to us? What we can do, what can we start enacting and delivering on in 23, 24, 25, 26 and onwards? And giving yourself that sense of confidence and ownership and start clearing it up so you feel like you have some integrity and transparency and clarity around where you're going to, and a lot for the front-facing, the business owners or the CEOs of the company, how they can stand forward-facing and speak to the sustainability inside the company or the business, because that's a big one, the narrative, and making sure everyone's speaking from the same sustainability hymn sheet around how the company is approaching and managing and navigating that. And I guess that then branches into that sort of branding and positioning perspective, and if you're wanting to differentiate the company and the business as well. So we go in and help sort of clear that up for you and give you some definitive understanding on where you're going and where you're at.
So finally, it's been really great talking to you, but I wanted to ask you a quick question, which has got nothing to do with environment. You're obviously very much in love with the Gold Coast. You're very passionate about it. It comes through in everything you're doing, and particularly in that environmental space. What is it about the Gold Coast that keeps you so passionate? What is it?
Oh, the Gold Coast to me is we have this really beautiful, dynamic city. I love that it's linear. I think that's a bonus of a lot of those sort of coastal towns. We have epic beaches, and I'm a surfer, so I'm in surf heaven.
That's a big win for it.
We are great, we're great pathways. We've got great infrastructure in terms of, moving around and walking and navigating in parts around the Gold Coast. So, and I think it's, it's young and it's fresh, and there's just so much new invigorated industries and sectors. And I'm so excited to see what's coming forward, but also these future generations. We take so many interns through our company, and I see the excitement and professionalism and the entrepreneurialism coming through in a lot of our university students. And I think Gold Coast is going to be really have a huge scope of dynamic industries and sectors, and I'm so excited to see how that plays out and the opportunities that come from that in terms of great businesses that can be driven and founded out of the Gold Coast. So there's so many aspects. I could chat about the Gold Coast forever.
That's lovely. Look, on that note, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a really interesting journey to watch where you started and to see how passionate you are and where you've got to now. It's been wonderful and enlightening. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on here. It's been great to chat.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for listening today. For a complete list of podcast episodes and transcripts, go to rdagoldcoast.org.au/podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter.